Hey, what's up, guys? We are here at Big Loud for our first episode coming out of the new year with a good buddy of mine, Justin Clough, who was actually a guest on an earlier episode when we first started the trenches. But we are here today to discuss with him his new music video for Morgan Wallen's Smile. So let's come on in. Well, Justin, thank you so much for being our first Run It Back guest. This is our second episode together. Of course, the first episode we discussed pretty much a lot. Well, wasn't clearly enough time, but we discussed, more about, you as a developing creative and a lot of your influences, so to speak, and this episode, thank you for taking the time. We're going to dive into actually your process on your new video for Morgan Wallen Smile. Mm-hmm. And what a great, awesome piece. I was there shooting stills and BTS stills for you and everyone, and it was a delight to watch. Yeah. I think I even told you that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a fun set. Big set.
I was definitely reminded of some early days of my glory days of big sets, and just where it wasn't just big production. It was that there was crew for every line item to do their job flawlessly, and that's what they did. Mm-hmm. And I was so impressed just watching everyone work. It was a master class, and it is created from the helm of you. To be honest with you, the people you've picked, where the concept comes from, and just everything about it. I want to take a little time from you and dive into it. Is that cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right,
let's do it.
I guess
hopefully I don't. I should have watched the other episode back. Hopefully, I don't repeat anything from.
No, we're gonna dive into this. Well, who knows? Yeah. Maybe
just end up having the exact same episode like twice.
Please no. Yeah. I guess like I said, all good. Projects I feel stem from the concept, the writing, the treatment phase. Can you dive into that a little bit? I mean, did it take many different treatments? Was it just one? How did that go?
Yeah, I think, like you said, actually that's the advice I give to everybody. I'm like, if you can't write it, you can't sell it. Yeah. That was something that I definitely didn't understand when I first started in the industry. I was like, I don't think, it never hit me that people have to read it first, With Morgan, it's interesting because we've been working together for so long that I think, it was solicited out, and they did get good treatments. I think from 4 or 5 other directors.
Oh, really?
But a lot of those directors didn't have any relationship with Morgan, and of course that doesn't always matter. Sometimes you just hit something the way you need to hit it, right? Sure. But or the way that an artist sees it too, even if you're guessing, but. I think that having had a long-standing relationship with Morgan just allowed me to write something a little more ballsy, I guess, than what most people would say, or than what most people would write. I think that conceptually, that concept, it is out of left field, but at the same time, it isn't in a way. There's a lot of MW DNA in it, and that was kind of, he hasn't done a video in a long time, and just tried to kind of capture. Or I tried to write something that captures the Morgan that I've worked with and the Morgan that I've known. And I think he read it and probably felt the same way. I don't know. I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I would assume that he felt similar. And I know that through the editing process, actually, the things he liked the most about it are the things that I think other people probably wouldn't have risked writing into the treatment. So
that's great.
I think that, like any director, they have an advantage writing for an artist that they know, even if they are being pitted against other directors. So, I think that concept it just made a lot of sense for Morgan. And for the song too, I think that song specifically, when I heard it, it's definitely not the Morgan Wallen song that people have heard for the last 5-6 years. Yeah. So I think it warranted something that was really special visually. And I think that, I know that Morgan has really liked all of the acoustic sessions we've done. So I wanted that when I talk about DNA, like things that have worked, right? It's like, okay, all the acoustic sessions, those have worked for Morgan. And what are they? Their studio, their performance. And that was kind of, I was like, how can I get him into a setting that feels familiar and feels similar, but also still feels fresh and new. And that
Hmm.
was kind of where the idea of, okay, it's a studio. Now let's build a narrative out around a studio.
Sure.
We have a walkout in there.
Yeah.
The walkout has been a thing for
Yeah.
him. We have
Play into
like,
his comfort zones.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We have all these things that are kind of like, in my opinion, they felt like evolved versions of what we've seen from Morgan in the last like 4 or 5 years. So I think it was important for me to hit on all those things.
Yeah. Sure.
And I think he liked the treatment when he read it. And I pitched 3 ideas actually, and I had a sneaky suspicion that he was going to read that. That was the one I wrote first,
Or is it?
and I was like, I think that's going to be the
Now,
one.
was the New Year's concept in the treatment something that you came up with um, as a clever, everybody is in that atmosphere of smiling, and there's this super juxtaposition where he's not, and that plays very well. Or was it a record label releasing the date on that, and you had to play into it, and you built a concept around that?
Uh, they had given me the note before I wrote the treatment that it was going to come out on New Year's Eve. They didn't ask for anything specifically, and
Yeah.
then actually really going full fledged like New Year's Eve was Morgan's push.
Oh,
Seth wanted it as well. I think though, when I talked to Morgan about the treatment, he was like, "I love it.
yeah,
I just would like to play in a New Year's Eve in some way, shape, or form." And then I had just proposed, why isn't it just a New Year's Eve special?
yeah, it's great.
And we kind of, I didn't want to date it specifically. So actually it was important for me when we did the New Year's stuff that I didn't want to put 2025 on it.
Okay.
Because if you watch this video
Yeah,
in
yeah, you're right. I don't
2025, it would
see.
say, like, I
Yeah.
don't want to, I try really hard not to date certain things.
Hmm.
Like none of my visuals will have cell phones or things like that. I
I do
just
the
try to
same.
keep it,
I do the same.
yeah,
I go so far as to like, literally, I'm so old school. I'll be like, find me a payphone, a telephone booth, where
yeah.
it's like, at least it was classy and cool.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
see like
Yeah,
Steve McQueen in a phone booth. It's like,
yeah,
that's cool.
yeah. No, that's like, actually, we talked about that on the Had Some Help video too. I did some creative direction on that video with Chris, and when we were talking about ideas, I think he had proposed a phone booth, and I was like, I love that. And that video starts with post in a phone booth.
Oh,
So,
okay. Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, I think the New Year's Eve thing, it kind of, I actually like when I was writing it, rewriting it, and put with that in mind, I was listening to Auld Lang Syne, the New Year's Eve song, and it was kind
Okay.
of this. It's this weird. That song has this weird way of making you feel sad that something's
Yeah,
over, but happy that something. It's a
absolutely.
really,
It's a weird time in
yeah,
general, but
yeah,
yes, they play and when the confetti goes off and
yeah,
it's just like, everybody's celebrating and there's that Morgan enters the room. It's like,
hmm, yeah, and
um,
that really, like, to me, that was like there's a wall between him and, like, that little room. Just to me represented like his this is like what's going on in his head, and once he leaves this room, it's like that nobody understands what's going on
yeah,
behind the closed
I
door.
enjoyed how simple, you could have made it complex. And by all means, it was a very complex delivery and execution.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like you could
Oh, it's a simple
overshoot
idea.
it, over dynamic it, but no, it was just like it had to have the story points, right?
Mhm.
Your overlapping action was a must for you, right? So you knew you were going real cinematic in that tone. You didn't have like an escape performance to
Mhm.
cut back to.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
You
that's kind of everything was the narrative was built into the perform. It wasn't a performance and then narrative and then
Yeah, you held on the
it
performance
was all
until
happening at the same time.
exactly.
Which that was actually, it was such a simple idea on paper, and when we really got into the execution of it, it was actually like really tricky,
Mhm.
honestly, to the inception that takes place of he's playing this, then choosing not to play that, and then playing something else was like there's we were definitely kind of threading a needle there because it would be very easy for that to have. I mean, there were versions of the edit that didn't make
Oh,
sense.
I'm sure you
So
shot everything
yeah.
and you can build around it, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah, and Chris Fenner really did a good job helping me cover that properly.
Oh, yeah, you did a fantastic job,
Um,
your DP.
yeah, Chris is the DP.
Yeah,
He's
absolutely.
responsible for the way it looks and feels.
Mhm.
And I think that he really helped me make sure that I had the coverage that I needed. And I think that anytime you're building a performance into a narrative, it's super hard. It's something that
Mhm.
I tend to find myself doing a lot. I think it's actually something that kind of helps my work stand out um rather than like hero performance, cut back to narrative,
Mhm.
hero performance, cut.
Mhm.
I try to build the performance into the narrative. Actually, there's an Ashley Cook video that I did too that did really well, called Your Place. But that was another one where we're threading the needle on like, okay, she's performing during this action, which means I can only use this action at
Yes.
this point in the
Yes.
visual, which makes your continuity really, really tricky. So you have to make sure
Yeah, because if you're not accurate in your continuity, you're
it's
left in the
wrong.
edit with a hole.
Right, exactly, and you don't have that escape valve, so, something that I make sure to do now when I shoot stuff like that is, like, I get the over the shoulders.
Okay, your dirties.
I get a dirty over the shoulder, and it's like,
Some inserts.
just leave the frame for me. Just
Mhm.
step into the frame for me so I can just put that wherever I want it.
You do have in your mind because those are difficult shoots to
Mhm,
plan out like that and to have it go as planned,
mhm,
especially when your artist could be late.
yeah,
Also, which I want to talk about,
mm,
a 1 day shoot.
mhm,
You can easily, as experienced filmmakers, we love to stretch out and
mhm,
have 2 days.
mhm.
It's the 1 day blues.
Y
Did that play a role in some of your creative decision making to be as cinematic as you did? Because that's usually where it's harder to do that.
mhm. Yeah, funny enough, the original treatment actually had footage not in the studio. There was footage that was supposed to be shot. The female was not going to be a part of the set. She was going to be watching from afar in an
Mm.
apartment or wherever, and we weren't going to reveal that until the very end, of the project. It was going to zoom out. It was going to be like on a TV. And I think that one, it really helped two things. It helped logistically to remove that scene, and I actually
Sure.
think it helped the narrative to remove that scene personally because I think exiting the world that we knew to go to this new world for the last like 10, 15 seconds didn't work. And some of that, actually a lot of that was Morgan's
Too
idea.
much of a disconnect, you think?
Yeah, Morgan wanted, I think I can't remember exactly how it had come about where I'd proposed that, but I think he had wanted something that it just he had wanted the treatment to be a bit more dynamic with the female lead, like less disconnected.
Yeah.
Um, So also, by the way, Morgan is very creative and he is like hands-on with this stuff. Like I'll come up with an idea and then it will evolve into what everyone sees
And I
with
will
the
s
help of Morgan.
and I will say on set, he was very active on the
Mhm.
camera, wanted to see the takes.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
it was impressive.
Yeah,
He was on
definitely.
the ball.
Yeah,
He
and
really got into the character. He
mhm.
didn't totally break out of it too much.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I got a few smiles.
yeah, he's great on set, but yeah, and it eventually evolved into bringing the female character into. It made more sense. I said, why doesn't she just start backstage with him? And then at the end, when he comes back, it's because
Yeah.
that also gave me a book ending where I could start and finish the project with the same shot.
Mhm.
And Morgan really liked that when I proposed it to him. He's like, that's cool. And it also allowed me to put him back in that space without the female there while the New Year's Eve celebration was happening, which I think just,
That's huge.
yeah, it just grew. It's honestly, it's a common thing where hey, let's just like simplify
Mhm.
you know let's simplify the idea. I think all ideas, right, unless your vision is to intentionally overcomplicate things or
Yeah,
oversaturate things like a um like a Gibson Hazard video or something where it's like, hey, I want as many
sure.
scenes as
Yeah.
possible, like, which is cool, it's
Sure.
awesome when it's done properly, but I think that for most people, just simplifying things makes it. And this video is, again, it was so simple. It was the song simple, the video is simple, um, but it does like thread that needle. I
Yeah.
think from an execution standpoint.
Well, let's talk about execution because it wasn't simple from an execution standpoint, and that's what's great about what we do is we make it look simple to the screen, right?
Mhm,
But what goes on is craft work, and that's
mhm,
exactly what I saw. And I'm no expert at it. I've definitely
You are kind of.
I've definitely been around
More so than most people.
I've been around a set or two.
Yeah.
And I have, obviously I've been on a few of your Morgan.
More than a few.
Yeah,
for sure.
almost all of them. A lot of them.
There's probably well, you shot that photo.
Yeah, I've shot a ton. I
There's
was walking through the offices here.
There's a plaque for chasing you in here.
But it was nice to see. I mean, I've seen growth in you, is what I was getting at.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
from like a couple of years ago to now. Wow, what you just laid back into this. You know, it was awesome. So I want to discuss your relationship with the DP. How involved have you become? Meaning, when you first start off, not you, I think a lot of us music video directors start off, oh, we're obsessed with the visuals, camera, visuals, visuals. Then we learn a bit more, like we're caring about the emotion, and we find our team, right? And we start to allow those people to do their job and really export. Sometimes I felt like I've stepped on them a little, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, how's your relationship with, say, Finner on this job? I mean, God, it was so wonderful to see you guys work.
Yeah. I mean, I probably drive Fenner nuts because I definitely have ideas while we're shooting that weren't necessarily discussed. But Fenner is great. I've been working with Chris for, I mean, he did Wait in the Truck. We've done so much stuff together. He did 7 Summers. He's done a bunch of Morgan stuff too, but he's done like all the acoustic sessions that we've done. So, Chris has worked with Morgan. He kind of knows what works. We've worked together extensively. So I think that my relationship with Fenner is interesting because it is, like you said, and like, as a director, the visual is a big part of it, right? There's the dialogue and there's the business and there's all that stuff that you're also handling. But I think that visually, it's interesting because I've had projects with Chris Fenner where we never discuss a look. I just send him a treatment, and we don't share reference images. We're like, you want it cool or warm? Cool. All right, great. You know what I mean? Like,
that's cool.
it's like that. Sometimes that will literally be that will be as much as we discuss when it comes to how does this thing, you want it cool, warm, anamorphic, spherical. Like, those are the questions. And once we hit that, it's like, and I think that the things just start to develop from there. And especially with Chris, once we start scouting, I think then we make decisions on, okay, techno, okay, steady cam.
Make them together too,
but I also have all the faith in the world that, like, if I had to like direct a scene from home and I couldn't see what was happening, I could just hear it. I would trust that Chris is shooting it the right way. I think that he's a really good decision maker, and I think Chris has one of the best. When you first start this kind of leads into what I want to say here about Chris. When you first start as a music video director or any sort of director, you're really like, think you need to be in control of where the camera is, and eventually you realize that there's a lot of people that are much better at that than you. So oftentimes Chris will be like, where do you want the camera? I'll go, I don't know. Find me what you think is the best shot. And 9 out of 10 times it's right. And the only time it's that I don't like it is typically when I have something in my head that I should have previously communicated anyways. Right. So I think that
isn't it nice to know that you've had that growth though?
Yeah, it is. And I think with the Morgan thing, like when it comes to the execution of that video, like, you touched on the one day thing. There's so many other things going on that it's like, it's more important for me to go spend 10 minutes with management and Morgan and discuss that than it is to sit there and make sure the camera is sitting on the tripod in the exact right spot. So I think that, like you said, there's a crew member for everything. And when it comes to the execution on projects like that, it's really, you have to have guys like Chris Fenner, because if you don't have guys like Chris Fenner, it's going to be a total mess of a day. And that day was, in all honesty, still somewhat messy. But we got it done. They all
what
are,
music video isn't?
Yeah, they all
but
are.
The reason also is your DP is in charge of a big chunk of your crew.
Yes.
And keeping them happy and orderly, just keeping it moving.
I mean, realistically, the director of photography is in charge of more crew members than I am.
Yes. And why? Like, whatever. That's just that we fight for the ages.
Yeah.
I can, obviously I would, what was your reasoning for, Steadicam and techno? Is that for long pulls, carry the song, since the song had such a slow
uh,
pace.
yeah, I wanted like Morgan's a big enough artist, and I really like I like blockbusters. Out of an unpopular opinion, a lot of people like they're like artsy 4x3 like black and white shit, which is fine. That's cool too. But and sometimes projects warrant it. But for me, I like Top Gun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I'm like a blockbuster guy. So I think that uh proper camera support just feels blockbuster to me. And Morgan's a big artist. Like I think that it was important that when he came back with this visual, it needed to feel big. Like even
Mm,
if it was a simple concept, it needed to feel like there was thought behind it and it needed to feel big. And I think that you know, like a techno immediately just adds so much value to
yeah,
anything, right? I think those like
yeah,
that opening sweeping shot where it sweeps the floor of Caleb and it's
yep,
yeah, and you
yep.
see the set and it's like so I think that that was important. And I think also the reason behind a lot of those decisions is a time thing. So, you know, the time it takes to swing a techno up 40 feet compared to mount something from the ceiling is like it's like 20x to mount it from the ceiling.
My experience when using techno is that I have to use it, get it the hell out because I stay lazy on the techno, right? Now, I firmly believe you've played an exquisite hand at everything you were played. I'm referencing videos that probably were performance on the
Hmm.
techno, and it's like,
Hmm.
just get a 35.
Hmm.
No, it doesn't feel the same when it's. So
Hmm.
I just want to, do you ever feel not handicapped, but crux to this big techno that you get lazy on as as a creative
Well, you know what's funny?
on the big toys?
Uh, I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, probably. It
Sure.
depends on what I'm seeing on the techno.
Okay.
Um, like if I'm shooting something that's just like pure visual, then yeah, I guess I would lean more into it. Like, but it totally depends. Like if I'm shooting like truck bed, we had a techno and the techno made like so much sense for every shot on that video because
Yeah.
we needed to get the camera over the tops of big groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
And on that set, like I definitely got married to the techno.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't think I got married to it because I needed it visually. I think I got married to it because we had to have it.
Okay.
Whereas this set, you know, this set I really specifically didn't want to live 100% on techno. And I think the other interesting thing about this is like you could see the techno in frame and it didn't matter,
Sure.
right? Like
That
that
was
was
cool.
to our
You're right.
advantage. Um, so I think that uh this set was actually designed so that we could get the techno in and out super quickly. So there's all these 3D renderings of the space we built. I can give you guys some of
Yeah, I would
those.
like to talk about the art direction because in
Yeah.
some ways I feel like the art directions were the unsung heroes of making a lot of negative space big.
Hmm.
You had to, I mean, because you probably didn't have the production, I mean, house all of this stuff. So
Yeah.
you, with your art director, used negative space and your DP to backlight to kind of create these walls.
Hmm.
That was really good.
Yeah, they did a really good job. I think, you know,
I didn't
Chris.
feel it once.
Yeah, yeah. And actually like when we started getting into like the build of a TV set, we realized they're actually huge. They're like massive sets. And we were like, well, we can't, we're one day. We're not able to build all of that. So we
I'm
need to do
getting it.
something to fill that space. Um, so he did a really good job. Like the whole thing was Greg, who was the art director on this, um he designed in 3D space. We had actually a couple different teams working, but Greg designed sort of the layout of the studio, and then we had Zach Horan who was doing the lighting design.
Mm.
And that was what he was designing on the lighting was based on a decision that my Chris and I had made on the lighting rig that we saw. And then I think that we had Chris taking both of those things and he took that into whatever software he uses. And he, you know, I have a video of him showing him moving the techno around. So can we get it in and out of the space? Can we fit our cameras in with the broadcast cameras? Can we, when the camera's behind Morgan, is the crowd going to look too far away? Are we going to have, because the bleachers couldn't move.
I was just gonna say you were locked. You couldn't
Hmm.
afford the time to have to change everything, right? Is
Yeah.
that what you're getting at?
Yeah, exactly. So they did a really good job. Like again, this is where you talk about like threading the needle from an execution standpoint. It's
Yeah.
like these bleachers can't be too far away because it'll look Morgan will look like he's singing into the abyss, and they can't be too close because we have to get tons of
Yeah.
crew members
Yeah.
in between there
Yep.
when we're shooting the close-ups of Morgan. And the bleachers they brought him in, they set him up, and that bleachers team wasn't there to move them. And so it wasn't like something we could just repo them, you
Sure.
know?
Oh.
So every single thing you see on set was totally locked in. It never, we never moved the desk. We never moved the stage. We never moved the bleachers. It all had to be essentially like as it sits shot. So
Ironically, what started this whole second episode was you sending me a clip from our previous episode about
Mhm.
art direction set builds. And this brings me up to that because you had asked me in a previous, have I done many set builds? Handful. And I do know that my biggest struggle with set builds is, and this was probably a little bit before 3D renderings and things that we
Yeah,
did,
sure.
for them, but like I'd never had a concept of like 18 feet, 22 feet. It's gonna be 22 by 16. I lay it down by tape measures, and you're like, this is not enough. I need it bigger.
Mhm.
And next thing you know, I'm dropping a budget to get it bigger and bigger, and I get the set. Once it's erected and built and done, I'm like, big. Do you deal with that on when you're dealing with set builds and you're educating, you're giving your crew what they want, that you need, but you're looking at nothing?
But did you have like
We were doing tape measures on the ground, and I'm like, it's too
which
small.
we still do that.
I know,
It's-
but you don't
we
get
still mark it
you don't
all
get a
off.
perspective of wall space. I've always had that
Mhm.
problem, and this is all came up when you sent me that.
Yeah.
So here we are talking about set builds, and I thought I'd
Mhm.
bring that up.
Yeah, this yes, I always worry about that until you see, but we have like
You want to look at some stuff?
yeah, I could show you actually. Here, I'll move this mic. You're talking about the size of set builds, I think.
Yeah.
And does that ever make you nervous? Which
Well, just knowing what you need versus not, and then you're not able to really see it until it's there.
yeah. So I think that obviously like early 2000s things are a little different, whereas like all you probably had was like a drawing that somebody put up.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have, so you can see like um we have the studio floor layout. So this was the first thing that came to me
From your art director.
from Art. Yeah, he had drawn this up. The lighting rig was actually still in its infancy here.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it was, you can see that I got the little circle of death. There we go. You can see that we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fixtures across. I think we only ended up with 3 fixtures across.
Okay.
But this
Was that
is
because too much
red.
light? Too much
No,
light?
it was to do with weight. So the support beams up top couldn't with that the grid at that studio is not made for heavy lifts like that. Like that was a stage rig, and I think studio lighting grids are usually they don't so they actually had to go above the grid and straight into the ceiling.
Oh.
So they like
Mm.
we had this problem on the last job where I got there and they were like, yeah, we've been having issues, and they just kind of just did what they needed to do, and they like tore a bunch of insulation off the ceiling and just
Whoa.
rigged straight to the beams because they were like, we can't rig to because so typically it's kind of hard to explain, but there's the ceiling and there's beams that support the ceiling, and then as you know, there's a grid that hangs below the
Yeah.
ceiling, and then everything has to mount to that grid, but that grid is supported by
Yes.
wire, and it'll move whatever you need it to do, and there's power to it. We had a couple issues at this studio. One, we were having power issues in the back half of the grid,
Mm-hmm.
that's actually outside of what I'm even going to tell you now. But because to explain it properly, that grid didn't support the weight of this lighting rig.
Yeah.
So they had to go straight through the grid, and the grid was just kind of in the way at that point.
Yeah.
They had to go all the way straight up to those ceiling beams to make sure that we could support the weight of this. And it also was on motors, so we had full control of the tilt of it.
Yep.
Because there was it was at like 5% what you see in the video. I mean, it was emitting so much light that
Yeah.
we needed to make sure we had control of like, hey, if we can't get this light under control, because we also had a reflective floor.
Sure.
then we need to be able to just angle it
Yeah.
slightly up
I
a
was
bit
having a
more.
tough time with the still. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a lot of light.
Yeah.
You
You're
know, it was
just
good for the wise, but when you got up on some of them close ups, and it was tough. I had to now who's
you're hoping
I
the raws turn out.
yeah, hope I
Yeah.
can take some highlights down.
Yeah.
Whose idea was it to come creatively for this said light rig for that performance? It's such a trademark. It's such a staple in the video.
It was my idea. I'd pulled a couple of reference images. I wanted something super simple. It started as my idea, and then Zach evolved it into what we saw on screen.
Uh-huh.
Who is a lighting designer? He also does Morgan's tour. So we had Morgan's tour team out there doing that. So it was like the best of the best. But and they also have a pretty good idea of like what Morgan will and won't like. Just because I've spent so much time with him. But yeah, it started as my idea. It needed to be a super simple rig. Um, the biggest issue with the rig was that, like anything, when you're sourcing, what the way Zach put it, the lighting designer, he said, whenever you source that many of anything, it becomes a problem, right? So we needed like 100 of these little Fresnels that all needed to be able to be connected to the light board and all that and whatnot. So it was really tricky to find all those. And actually, from what I understand, I think all of those lights were driven in from Las Vegas on a truck like 2 days before the shoot.
Wow.
Yeah, because that was the only place that they could find and source that many of them. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I think that they drove them in from Vegas on the truck, and then that company had a warehouse here. They decided they were just going to keep them here, so it kind of worked out budget wise, and everybody got what they wanted. But it was like that was a trick for sure to find all those lights, and then once you find them, you need to get them all rigged up, and it's always hard until there's haze and until you see how much is the floor going to reflect, how much is
Absolutely.
so, and when you're working, you don't have that reflective floor. It's covered in film because you don't want to scuff it. So it's kind of like there was a lot of things that were kind of up in the air, basically up until the day of the shoot. But what wasn't up in the air was the actual size and where things were going to be placed in the studio. And that's what we're looking at here. We have this great diagram that was drawn up by Greg. And then, so we took this, you can see our desk here. And I wanted this angled. Initially, what I had was this angled and this angled.
Sure.
What we ended up doing was just angling the desk a bit further so that I still got that, and you would never know that we didn't have this and this angled towards each other.
Yeah, because the unique design to the art direction, but also the whole piece is that you are seeing three huge spaces at the same time.
And that
At
was
any given time, you're seeing three massive vignettes, locations.
Yeah, and that was actually something that was like pretty challenging for Chris, I think.
Yeah, spill.
Spill and control, and like, hey, we want to light I want light because I'm a big proponent of like I want light everywhere. I think that we had a couple takes actually of where Morgan is walking out on stage and you see the cameras in front of him and you see the audience in front of him. We had a spotlight hitting him, and I was like, let's cut that off because the spotlight was taking away from the fact that the crowd is standing there.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
That's my favorite shot in the video.
Of him walking out?
I don't know. I like the color of the monitor. It reminds me of an early Sam Bayer, Marilyn Manson video, Disposable Teens, which was, again, another huge set and a stage where it was the use of atmosphere and such and people create that wall. So I in the red light on the thing, it all works for me. Anyway, I'm glad you said that, but anyway.
No, it's good because I think that shot was specifically, it has a lot of value where it's like, okay, we see the whole crowd.
Yeah.
We're behind him. We see Morgan walking out, so I think that was, it's one of my favorite shots too. And it's not overdone. It's just the idea of that shot for me was like, this just needs to feel like ambiance.
Yeah.
So, and that's what it is because it makes those lights that needed to feel like ambiance. So that way, when that spotlight turns on and hits him, he's like, it's like, everything that the studio put there needs to feel like it's in his face.
Sure.
And that was the goal, right? It's like all this needs to feel like it was just stuck in his face. And he's kind of like, oh, fuck you guys. Do what I want. So we had this. So that helps me picture it. But you probably had similar diagrams, I'd assume, when you were doing this
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah. It's more when I was always out on location on a pre-light, I would panic,
Mhm.
because you're just seeing tape
Mhm.
measures or outlines and you're like, oh my God.
So
You know,
this is a good idea just for people to see. This is
yeah.
these are how many lights we had just on Caleb's setup or behind Caleb's setup.
That behind?
Sorry, actually, yeah, this is behind. Actually, sorry, this isn't lights. This is
Oh, those are the
the
rigs, the
flats. Yeah,
flats.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
flats. And then we had lights behind all of
Yep.
these so we could light them. They're actually clear flats, and then we just shaded them with gels to light them how we wanted to. And then we have so this is probably what you didn't have,
No.
assuming.
No.
So you I
Commercials.
really
Commercials had those.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So thankfully now in music video land we get these. This is a pretty good rendering of what
Yeah.
obviously the desk changed and a few little
Sure.
things, but um that's pretty
Yeah.
much verbatim what we
Yeah.
saw.
Hmm.
Um and then we had this. So this was a little more done up version of that render where we had the orange flats in the back.
Was an orange theme
Yeah, I
for
mean,
for
I,
for
I didn't talk
the
to Morgan.
Vols.
Yeah, so I didn't
So
talk to Morgan about that. Funny enough, but I just figured he'd be cool with
yeah.
orange.
Beautiful Auburn. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
beautiful color
yeah,
shade that you guys in the lights.
yeah. I think we went like a shade or two darker than Tennessee orange, and
Yeah.
then lit it up to Tennessee orange with
Yeah.
with
I definitely
lights.
recognize some Vol colors going on.
Yeah, yep. All right, so then this is like what I was talking about, where you can see this was to go
Yeah.
back to your techno discussion. You can see how Chris
There we
is.
go.
So this Chris sent this, I believe.
So when did Chris send this? How earlier to the job, to the day?
This was maybe like 3-4 days
Okay.
beforehand. We were
Okay.
pretty like, I mean, this was a fairly developed concept at this point.
Yeah.
There's initially curtain here, and we got rid of all
Mm.
that. Um, but yeah, you can see just figuring out where that techno is going to fit.
Mm-hmm.
Like here, we can see, okay, it's going
Yeah.
to hit tops of heads.
And do you have control of on this diagram how big your how long your arm is on your techno?
I think Chris does. I don't know. I'd assume that looks like the right size techno for what we shot.
Full
Yeah,
periscope. Okay.
fully extended. Yeah, he has a Super Techno
Got it.
30
Yeah,
in
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Wow,
that
that's
was
cool.
yeah, it was nice to see that because this space, the space where the techno is here. This was the biggest issue. Not having enough space here, but also not getting so far away that the crowd felt too
Because the crowd
distant.
is the blue, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think it was important that we made sure that that space was the proper size.
Sure.
Because if it wasn't, it really could have fudged things up because this was not, I mean, none of this was movable. Lights were not
Absolutely.
movable. So,
What do you think you would have done? Gone off techno, I guess, and gone.
well, if that ended up being the case, my plan for that was to just lens things way deeper and
Yeah.
scoot back because you can always crush things to make it look closer than it is. So it
Mhm.
wasn't going to be like the end of the world. It was more so going to be like I want an artist it was more so my thought about Morgan, and it was like like we went through this whole thing to get these teleprompters working, and it was like I just wanted to
Remember that.
be there for Morgan to see what he's looking at, right? I don't
Yeah.
want it's like that's such a simple thing. It's like I think it just for somebody he's not a full-time actor. He's a
Yeah.
musician, right? So it's like
Yeah.
little things like if he gets up there and he feels like the crowd is like 100 feet away, he's gonna be like, why are they so far away?
Yeah.
So it's avoiding like things like that just make somebody feel like awkward or uncomfortable because
It's important.
yeah, and actors are in such vulnerable spots. It's like everyone's staring at you and you have to stand up there and kind of
Yeah.
like in a way like do shit that makes you feel stupid
Yeah.
sometimes. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that it's important to eliminate all of the places where somebody could feel like a goof while there's
Mhm.
tons of eyes on them.
Mhm.
And that's like, things like this are those things, right? Like making sure the crowd's at the right spot, making sure teleprompter's working, making sure the lighting rig is going with the cues of the song, like things like that.
I
So
remember the teleprompter debacle. Many of them going back to pre-light
mhm,
prep day.
mhm,
I can totally see someone in this day and age being like, We'll just put that in post."
mhm.
Can't do what that feels. There's a bloom. There's just
Mhm.
again, back to what you were saying, making your artist feel comfortable that he's in that
Mhm.
scene. You fought heavy for that teleprompter to be the teleprompter, and we're not.
Well, and it's because it's one of those things where it was actually complicated to get it done. But for somebody who doesn't know that, he's
Yeah,
gonna walk up there and go, just put the words on the prompter.
yeah,
It's the prompter's there. It exists, but it was an analog prompter. That's where the problem was.
sure.
So there's like a whole another job to make somebody work that. And it still is like those things where it's like they seem so simple, but it's like, well, it's all about hands on deck. And then you have a prompter person that you need to hire for 15 minutes for the day. And they sit around and then people wonder why somebody's just sitting around all day. It's like, but then if you don't have somebody to do that, you waste an hour
Yep,
if the artist wants it trying to
absolutely.
figure it out. So I think that's where jobs like this are all about efficiency. And I think that, you know, again, that's why we built this set the way that we built it. This post was an interesting, actually.
Yeah, that was you were locked on that, right?
Yeah, but we
But you
ended up
used it.
using it.
It was a great use for the on air. Let's watch the video. You want to watch it?
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
go through
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I feel like we've. I want to go through it.
Yeah, we can fire it up. All right. You got some really nice pictures.
I did a really nice ones, and thank
Yeah.
you for putting that wood paneled wall there
Yeah.
because it is white behind it or cream. And yes, I was very fortunate that you and Chris lit that thing beautifully. I was a little worried about, oh God,
Hmm.
you know, usually on sets you guys take advantage of that low shutter,
For
and
sure.
stills doesn't have that. We battle that, but this was just so beautifully lit. I would say I got about 8 sizzlers from
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny enough, we actually so for people who are watching or listening, this wood wall behind Morgan, that's all fake. It's actually like if just off screen here, it's just you can see like the top of the wall and it's just white walls like you like the color of the door basically.
So your 4 corners is your framing is all
Yeah.
based on your 4 corners, but you
Yeah.
hear me say a lot.
Hmm. So yeah, that was in what Spidey's talking about is typically on film sets, there's not that much light, like not the amount of light a photographer would want. But we actually ended up shooting the A35 because it gets like 15 and a half stops of dynamic range, which back to the discussion we were having about that big lighting rig behind him.
Mhm.
We knew that we needed whatever camera was going to give us the most dynamic range is what we needed because we needed to feel those
Yep.
parkings.
Yep.
So we went with the 835, which is a 35 millimeter sensor. So it doesn't actually take in as much light as a lot of these other new cameras, even though that is like Ari's newest
Mhm.
camera outside the 265. But that camera, because the sensor is smaller, it doesn't take in as much light. So you have to light more like a
Mhm.
feature film, which was probably beneficial for photos.
And do you feel like the blacks? I feel like in that camera, the blacks just because you have to, maybe you aren't putting light always where it needs to be. There's just the blacks that feel filmy and just, I don't know. For me,
I,
I'm liking
I'll shoot the
that camera a lot.
835 over anything
Yes.
right now. Like I just, I always like I liked medium format and I like the large format stuff, but it just doesn't I don't need to see all that all the
Mhm.
time. And I
Exactly.
think like I'm somebody who like Chris knows talking about our relationship with Chris knows have like something that will give me 200 mil on set at all times and have something that will give me like 2 inches from an eyeball
Oh yeah.
at all times. He knows like that's one of those things where new DPs I have to remind myself that I need to tell them, hey, I need a full set of diopters and I want to make sure you have a doubler. And Chris, I have to have that combo with him. He
Absolutely.
just he just knows I'm gonna want to go tighter.
Yes.
Like,
So again, I want to help slow it down a little bit. When you shoot anamorphics, it's really
mhm,
really easy if you're not careful. To get lazy, but also with your sets, everything starts to look like it's shot from the same glass.
mhm,
So what he's saying is diopters, doublers is you have to kind of use those for anamorphics to get really in close. That's what
mhm,
kind of also gives it those close up
mhm,
beauty moments.
mhm. Yeah, the anamorphic. This is an anamorphic visual, but I wanted to shoot the cleanest anamorphics we could find because I was worried about flares off those lights behind him. And
Mm,
if the flares from those lights behind him in the main scene, what if that wasn't controlled, then we wouldn't not have been able to shot. I mean, it would have been a
And of
total
course,
mess.
you would not be a fan of mixed glass either.
Right, and I think
Was that an option?
I don't mind mixed glass if the glass that I'm mixing it with gives me something dynamic that
Okay.
so like I did a Travis Denning and Hardy video and it's primarily anamorphic, but we needed like a 200 to 500 with
that
a
driving
doubler
shot.
for a driving shot and for one other like shot that it's basically on like 1,000 millimeter.
Oh, yeah.
I could actually show you that real quick.
Yeah, of course we got to see that.
This is one of my favorite shots I shot last year, and it's only in the video for a second.
Like David Fincher, he'll shoot an incredible shot for like 2.3 seconds, and that's it.
Yeah, that's kind of how this is. It was like it's just a connecting shot, but it was like this. So this whole video is anamorphic, but then I wanted this shot of Hardy getting in the car here. So that's anamorphic.
Yeah.
That is shot
That's
at like
cropped, huh?
that's like 1,000 mil cropped to 235 with the spherical. So I mean, this lens, if you like set a quarter on top of it, it would look like it was bouncing up and down like 12
You're
feet.
so long.
Because you're so far. So the support we had for this lens was gigantic.
A damn table.
Yeah. And because you're so deep on it, this shot, the car looks like it's about to hit Hardy for like 2 minutes.
Get out of the way.
Because the car looks so close behind him. So
awesome.
It's kind of like, and you can just see the bugs
Yeah.
and shit flying around. Like, look at all that nasty shit. But anyways, we'll go back to Morgan. But yeah, we picked, anyways, that was dirty anamorphics. I was just showing you. These are super clean. And we picked super clean specifically to control the flare. And I'm okay switching between glass, but I don't think it made a lot of sense for this because it was commercial enough that I felt the clean was okay.
So casting, how was that? Did Morgan have a final say in your lead girl?
Yeah, him and I just texted back and forth. I sent him a couple links. We had a lot of submissions. We had probably like 200-300 submissions. And then we went back for a second round. So and I think that he didn't. Well, I'm not gonna comment. He didn't want to pick the type of person, and neither did I, that I think you would expect for a country music video.
Yeah.
So we went with someone who had a bit more of a unique look, I think. And Chandler was great. Honestly.
Yeah, and honestly, the whole cast was great.
Yeah.
Very believable characters in the bullpen. Doing all the I love the producers and the clipboards, and it's great. It's great. Look at this. Speaking of
close up, so this is diopter.
Yeah, this is diopter.
His eye actually, funny enough, was twitching on set.
Wasn't he worried about that?
Yeah,
I had photos where he was like,
no, you can actually.
Oh, I see it.
You can see it, which is funny.
He was
showtime. Let's go.
Oh wait, I saw a bogey.
So this is actually didn't matter. That's David. He's Morgan's actual BTS.
I didn't know if that was David
or one of the two Davids.
Yeah, one of the two.
But it's kind of funny. He was like in the shot, and it totally didn't matter. He's like right there with a fucking camera filming as soon as the door opens, and I was like, that's
it.
Works. Yeah, that's the idea.
That's where we would be.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Love the score.
Yeah, so the score actually, so we had
amazing.
two people working on sound design. We had my buddy Kyle doing the musical elements, and then we had I can't remember his name. It was my first time working with him, and I actually communicated with him basically through the producer Elliot, who, by the way, did an amazing job on this. And he initially, the score, we had the hymns from the song under this, and Morgan wanted to keep the song completely out of it, which I think was a really good decision. And we ended up having Kyle score this, and so it's just all in the same key. And
I love that decision too.
Yeah, I think it's smart because it really adds more to it when it actually starts.
Absolutely,
conceptually that works, and I think also the sound design and sound mix is incredible on this. He really, like, when he walks out of this here.
Yeah, you see those baby blues right there.
Yeah.
Showtime.
He was good too, that actor.
Yeah, he's like this.
That sets the tone of what you're about to see. Didn't get to use the take where I jump out, huh?
Lead you the rest of the way.
It was in there for a second.
No, I'm glad it wasn't.
One of the most popular pop stars in the world singing his hit song, Love Somebody, Mr. Morgan Wallen.
What a great. What now? Whose idea was to cast Caleb? I mean, it's so brilliant to the brand at this point, but like, who was that? Let's discuss that.
My girlfriend will say it was her idea.
Okay. Well, we got to give it to her.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, we'll give it to her. But no, I think that he was him and Morgan have had a relationship. You know, we it kind of just made sense. He does host his own show. He has his own thing, and he also is someone who, you know, when I started thinking about it, I was like, it makes a lot of sense because if you know who he is, it's funny and it's awesome that he's in there. But if you don't know who he is, it doesn't pull you out of it.
Not at all.
It's just he's just a show host, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that was like it doesn't distract too much from the visual, and he honestly was like really good at it.
I loved watching. I was close to you guys shooting a lot of photos. You guys were. I loved watching how fast he was at coming up with some different lines.
Oh man, he's
They were
like,
all good too. And you're like, I don't know.
And I'm slow at like if I need to write something, it takes me a minute to figure it out.
Sure, you got to sit with it.
Yeah, I need to sit with it, and he's like the opposite of that, where you can just rapid fire, and I'll be like.
But he was super pro. He stayed right there. He was even working on how he said it and delivered and slid on the chair, reeled off the chair. It was really cool.
No, he was awesome. He was really, really on the money. And he gave us so many options. Like this is actually 2 different takes cut together where he's saying 2 totally different things. And he also
Most popular pop stars in the world singing.
So I think that people probably don't understand. Like if you don't know who Caleb is, you don't understand that that's like a joke, the way he introduces him.
Pop star.
Yeah, popular pop star. Like, but anyways.
Hit song, Love Somebody, Mr. Morgan Wallen.
So here's that shot
There's
you're
that
talking
shot.
about.
Yeah.
Starts
It's a
with the
great
crowd
shot.
and- yeah.
Was right with him with this.
So that intro was initially shorter. I actually have a 7-second long version of it.
Oh, really?
And then I had like a 30-second version of it. And this is the version I would have wanted. I just assumed they were going to want something shorter. And Morgan and everybody was like, Morgan, Seth, Morgan's team, they all were just like, how you want it. And they're like, that's great. So I thought it was really cool that they were down to like, just kind of say, fuck the data for a second. And like, you know, obviously they still care, but at the same time, it was nice to see the correct creative decision come through on a project. It doesn't happen super often.
I like now here we implement handheld for the first time to give it some sense of unsettling, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think,
I can't remember the last time.
really wanted like this hectic feel, like backstage, like, you know,
why are we off cue?
Yeah. And then this like real smooth, just like Morgan in his pocket, like camera just kind of floating as he's doing his thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it kind of puts him in control and them out of control, in my opinion.
Yep, it does.
And here you got the teleprompter kind of dirty in the frame. Felt like that was nice. Not intentional in all honesty, but we found it in the edit. So this is a good example of what we were talking about with these lights back here. So the A35 retains all this. The fact that you can see all of the detail in these lights in bulb structure, and Morgan is not just a dark shadow, is really, really impressive.
That's remarkable. Now was Finner exposing under, knowing that he has the latitude to push up?
A lot of times he exposes over and then pulls down like 2 stops with like a LUT, but I don't know what he was doing. He's pretty like, I know that like RE cameras will retain their highlights better at a higher ISO. So you'll get like an added half stop of range if you go up to like ISO 1600. And they will, so sometimes he goes up and pulls back. I mean, I've seen him do just about everything. So
crazy.
Whatever magic he worked to get this frame looking the way it does is impressive.
Now we see. Well, I want to talk about color in a minute. But
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
keep working. Let's keep working through this.
Your tipsy friend grabbed that bartender, gave him a phone,
Love that look.
pulled us over there with
Good use of your space, the stage.
baby, I haven't seen that side of you in forever.
So these little
Love it.
inserts are the things that like really build the world, but they also are the things that take forever on set, and they're the easiest things to be like, fuck it, we don't need to do it.
Were they the last things you shot, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
like we went and picked up these. Like I was pretty adamant on the fact that we needed to pick these up as quickly as possible. And you know, Chris did a great job again, just capturing these the way they need to be captured.
It does open the space up with detail.
So again, here's a good example. Not to get too techie, but look at, you can see all of the texture on his back, and it's just getting plastered with light. Like the fact that that jacket is not blown out anywhere is just so impressive. That's like old 35 millimeter.
I'm just happy I wasn't in your way on those technos, sweeping around.
It wouldn't really matter much.
They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, but you ain't said one since you woke up.
I love that shot.
So the lights actually behind him, we had programmed something where they start changing, so they kind of do like a little twinkle. You can sort of see that start to happen here, and it really.
Is that something you knew about going in, or explored when you were there?
I'm sure Fenner knew about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I did.
Yeah, he wouldn't alert you to that problem yet. Yeah. I like how you didn't oversell, overstage anything. You let the audience be educated enough to get it.
Yeah, I think it's like, it is. I mean, there was a lot of discussion about, are they going to understand he's playing the wrong song? And I think that the decision we ended up making was just putting our faith in people to, like, it's in there enough. Like even subconsciously, it's off script. It says "love somebody" here on the TV.
You're letting the viewers come along for the ride and learn the whole thing. It definitely shows Morgan in control, and their world is not.
Yeah, that was like really what I wanted to. The point that I think needed to be made with these people is like, also the underlying tone of like them hating it when he decides to do it and then celebrating it when it works.
Yeah, it's like, ugh, yeah. Another,
It's like watching like a stupid play on a football field where the quarterback's like running around and like you think they're about to throw an INT and then it's tipped and someone catches it and they score a touchdown. You're like, yeah, that's great. But it's like it totally, you were totally not.
That was not going to be the outcome for sure.
Yeah.
So this was just a lot of just coverage when I remember on the day, right? Just quick coverage, getting it.
Yeah, we just got in there. I mean, Chris lit
Hose
that
it down.
360 and really we had two cameras and we just, I had kind of pre-directed the entire sequence and everyone at that point was the last thing we shot. So everyone really understood what the point was.
Great.
So they just got in there and we actually did have it playing on those TVs. So they were able to watch it. And just kind of react to it.
While the video's playing, you mentioned, you like light kind of the world. Can you explain as to why you as a director like to have a set lit?
Yeah, I think
versus lighting as you go.
For this, like there's so many characters in this scene. There's like him, her, two guys down low, and then there's like three people up top. So the idea of individual inserts was just super daunting. And I was more concerned with what they were doing than how they were lit because I didn't feel that it looking super pretty was important.
Yeah.
Actually, in a way, I think if that had looked pretty and stylized in there, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
So it was more so like, just let's just get light everywhere and just let them move in and out of it.
Yeah, it's more about the actions, if anything, than blocking.
Yeah, and I think that's something people can really get like caught up in is they'll think like everything needs to be stylized. If it doesn't look cool enough, it's not a good frame, especially music video people, and that's just not the case at all. all honesty.
Do you enjoy kind of breaking a lens style on a job? You know, a lot of the time we're conditioned to maintain a lens style. That's what keeps your audience engaged. But there's no rules. You broke that rule intentionally so you can have the audience feel something. Is that something a little bit irregular for your, I don't know, your filmmaking OCD-ness, you know?
It was like when we got to this and we decided to go handheld and really just start like spraying it down. It was like a little jarring when I first saw it. I kind of was like, I feel like we're in like the Pentagon. Like,
yeah, it's just
like
too Born Supremacy.
Born Supremacy. Yeah. But at the same time, I think I knew it was the right decision because it needed to have a strong, different. It needed to feel in the same world, but it needed to be jarring enough that it felt like they weren't in control anymore of what was going on. So that was kind of why I was okay with it. But I did mull it over once I saw the first few frames of the camera moving like that and thought it was crazy. But I felt confident. Chris felt confident, and I think Elliot, the producer, felt confident that it was the right decision.
You discussed it with your team, so it wasn't just you. You're like, am I crazy? Talk me off the ledge here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I do the same
exactly.
thing. It was great to see her back in the actual show. I thought she was leaving. I'm like, oh no. Yeah, I love that. She didn't know where it was going. But it was funny too when I was midday, I think I came up to you and I was like, I see it. It's all coming together. I just need a few pieces. It's all working.
Yep. Yeah, it was kind of there was a little more narrative with her too. We did have like a photo and like some other stuff that we had worked in there, and I think Morgan just liked keeping it more simple, and it was the right call for sure.
Yeah.
I've shown both versions to a couple different people, and everyone likes the version with less of her better because it helps keep her story and their story just more subdued.
Yeah.
The video is not about that.
Absolutely.
And the song is about that, but ironically, the video is not about that. But it is still there, and I think that's enough for people to understand that
was tastefully done.
About. There's also like randomly like a lot of characters in this, so I think it was like an establishment standpoint of like, when do I establish this character? When do we establish these characters? On like a 5-minute narrative. It was Mike did a super good job in the edit. He's over at Rock Paper Scissors, and he really helped figure out the right time to establish the right beats.
Sure.
And I think that helps really drive the story home.
I don't want to go off mark, but you said rock, paper, scissors. I used to work in the vault there, and that's how I started to meet David Fincher when I was playing Space Invaders right next to Angus Wall's room, and that's where David would be cutting with Angus, and that was anyway off mark. But rock, paper, scissors is a powerhouse editorial company, boutique company that has been at the height of the game forever in LA. But anyway,
yeah, they are definitely one of the best.
Yes. The camera movement is so much a character in this.
That shot back there is, I think, my favorite performance shot. It's really just the lights and this shot right here.
Yeah.
It's pretty epic.
You don't say. Hey,
we
it's
also
epic.
I had made the decision with Mike to put this fade to black in here, which was kind of a weird decision.
I was gonna comment on that.
Yeah,
I was gonna comment on the fade to black, the dip. The moment in time is gone. It feels like it's gone when he says it. You're like, ugh.
It works with where the song is, and I kind of felt like it brings us into a different part of the narrative. In a way, I don't know. I like fade to blacks. I think that they're underutilized, in all honesty.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I talked to Elliot about it, and I was like, "Do you like that?" He goes, "I thought about it." I was like, I didn't know. But
well, it's just because you haven't seen it in the piece. If you had carried it throughout the piece, it has a thing. But but I think it has an importance on a very important line in the song.
Right. I think I did a bunch of fade to blacks and chasing you video too, actually.
Yeah.
It's a really like classic technique though.
Sure.
That I think gets lost.
It's awesome that there's a minute and 15 seconds of interlude and roughly 50 seconds, and it's so that's 2 minutes and change more of really story building. I mean, it's without it, you don't have a story.
Right.
And that's what's rad. You put key story elements where it has to count.
Yeah, and that's why I think like this intro, like I haven't heard many people complaining about it, thankfully. A lot of people complain about the length, but I mean, there's like 3 scenes built into like a minute, so it moves pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
And every scene, like even, the dialogue here, like don't forget to smile, whatever. There's all,
Yeah.
I feel like people,
It carries you.
yeah, it's good enough that I feel like people understand they're learning something,
Absolutely.
rather than just like a couple arguing about nothing.
Editing wise,
Mhm.
post how you shipped it off to LA or whatever, you got it to them. Do you usually
New York, actually.
Is it
Yeah.
New York? Oh,
They got a house in both places.
I just
but-
think of the one I was at, and
yeah. Mike was out in LA and he moved to New York
Oh, okay.
just recently.
Do you have? How long did it take him to have a cut to you?
He's quick, man. It took him like maybe a week.
Because you're choppy. You're pretty savvy in the edit suite. So
Yeah, we got to a point where it just wasn't. They were asking for things, and Mike was doing things, and I was like, "Just send me the edit." And I got into the edit and put like a day and a half of work on it, and then Mike finished it out.
Okay.
Because I just needed to move a couple beats to where I felt they should be, but all of that was like more so moving work that Mike had already done too. So
Okay.
he's really good, man. He's musical. He's a drummer. He's like, we had a lot of sessions on this for sure, but
virtual.
yeah.
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 Did that drive you nuts?
No, I don't mind it. I mean, a lot of times, like he'll just do stuff, and I'll go eat or whatever, and
Okay.
come back. It's more so the way they do it. They just have these rooms now, so you can he'll just when he's cutting, I can just pop into the room whenever I want to,
Mm-hmm.
and then we can talk about it. He can show me what he's doing, and a lot of times it's less of like a hey, do this, do that. We do get into sessions like that, but a lot of times it's like here's what I'm working on. Help just push me in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, he's great. And then, from there, obviously sound
Yeah.
did a really good job because all this stuff, when you're just watching this edit before sound and color, it's really, really dry. So I think, once we got it to sound and sound came through, and once, Jacob McKee did color on it, and he's done color for a bunch of Morgan stuff, but I mean,
Where's Jacob out of?
Jacob is out of California,
Oh.
out of Los Angeles. He was with Forager. I don't know what post house he's with now.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
What was the? I mean, did you have any? Do you obviously another virtual session too, right?
Mhm.
I've done some virtual color sessions, and I was very pleasantly surprised. Now you do get into the
As long as your monitors.
you got to get into your situation where you're looking at every different monitor. You don't know which one is calibrated, but yes,
You do half a session with flux running, and you realize you fucked everything up.
you get the thing like,
Yeah.
why is it
Yeah.
magenta?
Yeah. No, Jacob's really good. Jacob's another guy who I've worked with him for a long time, and whenever he comes to Nashville, we try and grab lunch or whatever. But
That's cool.
he's from Georgia originally, so he's a Southern guy. But yeah, he's just pretty on the money. I mean, the first version he sent me was a little too saturated. I told him I wanted it saturated. I told him I wanted it colorful, quote unquote. And really, I just wanted a blockbuster. I wanted the teal and orange. I wanted the stuff that makes people's brains happy when they see it. Because again, expecting a lot of views on it, so it's just making sure that we're appealing to as many people as possible.
Absolutely.
In my opinion. But yeah, he did a good job, and I think we did one. I did like maybe 2 hours with him on a session, and it's cleaned up and ready to go. So he did a
Nice.
really good job keeping retaining the highlights, and pulling this shot here was that shot that you like. This was a hard shot to figure out because it was, high ISO, not a ton of light. Like we might have been slightly, like you can see that like
Under?
his skin tone. Yeah. So he was working with there was a couple shots in here that were definitely tricky, and he crushed it. But he's a feel guy too. Like he's not like some colorists are super technical and by the book. And I think Jacob, one of the things I really like about him is I know that he like works. I don't know if he'd like me saying this, but I know for a long time he was like doing big jobs and he was just like cutting on like he just had a keyboard and a mouse and like a magic pad.
That's
Which like when you're a colorist on like big commercials or
Yeah, hey,
like he did
that's
he did the Taylor Swift movie.
Oh, okay.
So like I don't know if he did the Taylor Swift movie on like a magic keypad. Like if he did, that's fucking awesome.
Hey, that's awesome.
But, yeah, he just like it's just like does it feel right or not?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's he's a guy that I would trust to make it look how it needs to look.
All things considered, you know, when you go into a job, you have high hopes and you're living in it, you're passionate in it. You know, sometimes you end the job, you're like, you know, I could have done this or this could have been, or you're pleasantly surprised, or just the film gods went along with you. How did this video fare with you from the beginning to where it ended up at the end?
You know, I always good. I really like the video. See if I can find the treatment actually. What I do is when I'm on set, like I will pull the treatment up and just look at the monitor, look at the treatment, think about what we shot, you know, am I yeah. Oops, that's the other concept I wrote. We did not do that one. Let me see if I can. So here's the treatment. I'll bring this and I'll just sometimes I actually have a piece of sticky and I'll just stick my phone next to the monitor and I'll just have the treatment up on it the entire time I'm shooting. So I'm like, am I shooting the treatment? At the end of the day, if someone doesn't like it, I'm like, well, I shot what I said I was going to shot. Right. So I think maybe that's like a selfish thing to do, but it's like I'm just covering my ass, make sure like, am I delivering the product that I told them I'd deliver? So for this one, like when I left, I was like, great. Like, so you can see like we're backstage at a late night TV show. Morgan sits solo. In
Still got some vibe though. You're giving it a vibe. You see the wood walls. It's a little on the dank. You get greens playing in.
As he walks the stage, the TV executives are in his ear. It's upbeat. It's what people want. Make sure to wait for our signal. Morgan is out of it, emotionally in his own space, nods his head and steps out to the stage. Then you kind of have pretty similar to what we shot, honestly, this frame especially.
Yeah.
You know,
great.
Lights blast him, audience stands there. So yeah, this is kind of, so this has the original.
Yeah, that's the one I got sent before going to, and I was wondering if that was going to be a translate. I'm like, where are we doing this?
Yeah, well, they talked about doing that. And initially they talked about doing it as a translite, but then we were going to use the translite also as the backdrop of the stage. Would have totally worked.
That would have been,
to double that over. But it was too heady and it didn't feel right to, you know, based on what the discussions Morgan and I had and Greg and I about, like, it just felt right to just put her in the narrative. There was no reason for her not to have at least one interaction with Morgan, in my opinion.
Agreed.
And it totally helps sell the visual.
Absolutely.
But yeah. I mean, overall, I think it's great. There's nothing really that I like. You know, I did initially picture Morgan walking through the confetti in slow-mo as people were kind of cheering around him. But he had done this walk off stage a couple times and he really liked just walking off into the darkness like that. And
party happens behind him.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like he doesn't need to, the party should be separated.
Yeah.
I think that he made the right call on saying, like, let's just.
He's separate than the party, you know?
He was like, I like just leaving before all of that.
It definitely makes that moment so powerful and back to being alone in the room. Man, thank you so much. This has been like in-depth director process. We needed this. This is something we talked about when we ended the episode last time. You know, we're like, man, we could go on forever and ever, but this, I really feel like we dove into it. Do you feel like we missed anything that you could think of? I mean,
no, I totally think we covered it all.
Covered it from treatment. Hey, we started at treatment and we ended at treatment.